We rarely think of plants as fighters, often perceiving them as passive inhabitants of our world. But beneath their calm exterior, a hidden struggle for survival unfolds, a constant competition for light, nutrients, and even the very air they produce. It's a silent war waged on a microscopic scale. They are the silent producers of oxygen, the life-giving gas that sustains almost all life on Earth. Yet even they must compete for the air they create. A paradox of nature where abundance doesn't guarantee equal access. The tallest trees cast shadows, stealing sunlight from the smaller plants below, and roots intertwine, vying for precious resources in the soil. In the quiet corners of the earth, a battle rages, a battle for survival, for dominance, for the very essence of life. Not of tooth and claw, no dramatic clashes or visible wounds, but of molecules and metabolism, a subtle dance of chemical reactions that determine who thrives and who withers. It's a game of efficiency, of adaptation, of outsmarting your neighbors at the molecular level. What happens when a living organism is sealed away, with only the resources it has at hand? How does it adapt? How does it survive? And what are the limits of its resilience? To find out, we created a tiny, isolated world, a self-contained ecosystem where the drama of life and death would play out in miniature. A glass jar, a miniature Earth, a closed system where every breath, every drop of water, every ray of light is accounted for. Our goal? To witness the push and pull of gases, the delicate balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide, the exchange of life and decay, the constant cycle of creation and destruction that fuels all ecosystems, and the signs of an ecosystem thriving or faltering, the subtle clues that reveal the health and stability of our miniature world. The story we uncovered was more dramatic than we imagined, a testament to the resilience and fragility of life, a silent epic within glass, a microcosm of the larger world, reflecting the same struggles and triumphs that play out on a global scale. The air we breathe is not just a given. It's not an infinite resource to be taken for granted. It's a shared, limited resource, a currency of life, carefully balanced and easily disrupted. The stage was set, the subject chosen, the parameters defined. And our vigil was about to begin. A silent observation of a world within a world, a journey into the unseen war for breath. Our experiment began with a simple glass jar, chosen for its clarity and ability to let in sunlight. Inside, we placed a healthy carpet of moss, an ancient, resilient plant that has oxygenated Earth for millions of years. Alongside the moss, we added a bit of native soil, teeming with unseen bacteria and fungi. These microbes are nature's recyclers, essential to the cycle of life and death. The final step, sealing the jar airtight, cutting it off from the outside world. Only sunlight could enter, powering the internal engine of photosynthesis. This jar became a self-contained biosphere, a fragile planet in miniature. For 13 days we would observe, measuring the fate of this tiny world, one breath at a time. Would it find balance or spiral into collapse? On day 1, the air inside the jar was carefully measured to match the ambient conditions of the room, a standard starting point for our experiment. We wanted to establish a baseline, a clear picture of the environment before the biological processes began to significantly alter it. That meant about 21% oxygen, the same as the air we breathe outside. This is a crucial element for both the moss and the microbes within the soil, as they both rely on oxygen for respiration, albeit in different ways, and approximately 415 parts per million carbon dioxide. This level is consistent with current atmospheric CO2 concentrations, and it represents the primary carbon source for the moss as it begins to photosynthesize. The moss looked vibrant, a lush green, seemingly ready to spring into action and begin the vital process of photosynthesis. Its health and vitality were key to the success of the entire ecosystem. Meanwhile, the microbes in the soil, a hidden universe of microscopic life, waited to begin their own life processes, breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients. Their activity, though unseen, would be just as critical to the overall balance. This artificial balance, carefully constructed and measured, wouldn't last for long. The introduction of living organisms meant that change was inevitable. Under the constant illumination of the lamp, mimicking the sun, the moss began to absorb carbon dioxide from the air, and through the magic of photosynthesis, released oxygen as a byproduct. This process started enriching its tiny world, slowly but surely altering the atmospheric composition within the sealed jar. But it wasn't a one-way street. Both the moss and the microbes also consumed oxygen in their own respiration processes, utilizing it to fuel their metabolic activities. And in return, they released carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, creating a continuous cycle of exchange. This interplay of consumption and release set up a natural tension within the closed environment, a constant push and pull, a delicate dance between photosynthesis, the process of creating energy from light, and respiration, the process of using that energy to sustain life. The central question that drove this experiment: would the moss, with its photosynthetic prowess, produce oxygen at a rate faster than the entire system, including itself and the microbes, could consume it? The fate of this miniature world, this self-contained ecosystem, hung precariously in the balance, dependent on the outcome of this ongoing biological tug-of-war. Each day, we would observe as the invisible battle for breath played out, a silent struggle between life processes unfolding at a microscopic level. This daily struggle would ultimately shape the destiny of everything contained within the glass, determining whether the ecosystem would thrive, stagnate, or even collapse. The outcome of this experiment would reveal the true resilience, but also the inherent limits, of life when confined to a closed system, offering valuable insights into the fundamental principles of ecology. And so, the experiment had officially begun, marking the start of our journey into this miniature world. To track the jar's invisible changes, we used a digital gas meter with sensitive probes for oxygen and carbon dioxide. Each day, we drew a tiny air sample through the airtight port, recording precise readings. This data became the language of the jar, translating silent chemical processes into numbers we could understand. The meter revealed the daily rhythm: oxygen rising with photosynthesis, falling with respiration. By plotting this data, we created a visual chart of the jar's vital signs. The numbers told a story of production and consumption, of life and decay. Without these digital sensors, the most dramatic part of our story would have remained invisible. The data would soon reveal the first signs of trouble. The first few days seemed tranquil, almost idyllic. We watched with anticipation, hopeful that our little experiment would flourish. The moss appeared vibrant, a miniature forest thriving within its glass confines. The moss stayed lush and green, a testament to the initial conditions we had created. It was a promising start, a visual confirmation of the moss's well-being. We felt a sense of accomplishment, believing we had successfully nurtured a self-sustaining ecosystem. But our data told a different story, a narrative unfolding beneath the surface of what we could see. The numbers painted a more complex picture, revealing subtle shifts that the naked eye couldn't detect. Oxygen levels climbed steadily, an encouraging sign of the moss's photosynthetic activity. The plants were actively converting carbon dioxide into the very air they needed to survive, a positive feedback loop in action, peaking at nearly 23% by day 7. This was significantly higher than the ambient air around us, a clear indication of the moss's thriving state and its impact on the enclosed environment. The jar was becoming richer in the breath of life, a miniature world brimming with oxygen. It seemed like our little ecosystem was not just surviving but flourishing, exceeding our initial expectations. Then subtle changes appeared, almost imperceptible at first. These were the initial cracks in our seemingly perfect ecosystem, the first signs that something was amiss. The moss's edges yellowed, a warning sign that something was out of balance. This discoloration hinted at stress, a signal that the moss was struggling to maintain its vibrant health. The oxygen rise stalled, then began to decline, a worrying trend that contradicted our initial observations. The positive feedback loop was breaking down, and the consequences were becoming increasingly apparent. By day 9, browning spread, consuming more and more of the once vibrant green moss. The ecosystem was visibly deteriorating, a stark contrast to its initial flourishing state. And condensation increased inside the jar, a sign of imbalance in the water cycle. The excess moisture created a humid environment, potentially fostering the growth of harmful microorganisms. The musty odor hinted at decay, a clear indication that decomposition was taking place. The air within the jar was no longer fresh and clean, but rather heavy with the smell of rot. By day 13, oxygen had dropped below its starting point, a complete reversal of the initial trend. The moss was now consuming more oxygen than it was producing, a sign of a failing ecosystem, to a dangerous 19.5%. This level of oxygen is considered hypoxic, potentially harmful to many organisms, including ourselves. The air was now less breathable than the world outside, a shocking realization that our carefully constructed environment had become less hospitable than the natural world. The time-lapse and data together told a powerful story, a visual and numerical representation of the rise and fall of our miniature ecosystem. A boom, a peak, and a rapid decline. The health of the moss was tied directly to the chemistry of its air, a delicate balance easily disrupted. This highlights the interconnectedness of all living things and their environment. The jar had become a microcosm of ecological collapse, a cautionary tale of how even the smallest ecosystems can be vulnerable to imbalance. A world running out of breath, a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining a healthy atmosphere. The warning signs were clear, a lesson in the fragility of life and the importance of environmental stewardship. Inside the jar, air was a shared resource constantly exchanged. By day, moss inhaled carbon dioxide and exhaled oxygen, enriching the atmosphere. For a while, photosynthesis outpaced respiration and oxygen levels rose, but moss also breathed, consuming some of its own oxygen. More crucially, billions of microbes in the soil respired too, breaking down dead matter and using up oxygen. As moss fronds died, microbes multiplied, accelerating oxygen consumption. The balance tipped oxygen use outpaced production. Each dying piece of moss fueled the very process that depleted oxygen, creating a feedback loop. The microbes began to outcompete the moss for air, pushing the system toward collapse. The struggle for breath had reached a critical point. The first warning was subtle, a stall in oxygen production around day 7. The system's peak had passed, consumption now outpaced creation. Yellowing moss signaled stress as chlorophyll broke down and photosynthesis faltered. Rising condensation and a musty odor revealed heightened microbial activity. The jar was becoming a swamp, choked by its own waste. By day 13, the ecosystem was in freefall. If oxygen kept dropping, the moss would die, fueling even more microbial growth. Eventually, only anaerobic organisms would survive. What began as a vibrant world of production had become a tomb, a stark lesson in the fragility of balance. In a closed world, the fight for breath is relentless and the margin for error is razor thin.